am recording. Wow. All right. Welcome to this clinic on routine documentation. My name is Felix, and I will be leading this clinic today. We already confirmed we can see the stream. Yay! You guys are free to ask any questions you have during the clinic in the stage chat, like you have been chatting in so far. There will also be like a designated question period at the end. You can't think of anything until the very end of the clinic. This clinic is being recorded, and I will send out a ping with the Felix's writer's role once the recording is uploaded and available on YouTube. Yay! All right, let's get into it. So, first little bit here. Try not to be a boomer with the slides. Haha. Okay. So this is the broad overview of what we're going to be looking at today. So just to begin, how to stay organized in terms of like general communication with your writers at the beginning, as you start to think about what are we going to do for this routine. Then we'll look at selecting writers. This is a question that a few guys asked in the sign up thread, like how do I pick mains and alts? So we'll go over that a little bit. We'll look at commanding notes. So what makes good commanding notes, in my opinion? Your opinion may vary, but we'll talk about what I've noticed. And then what makes good writer notes. And I have some examples from some of the Crystal Pirates of their note taking. Alrighty, let's get into it. I'm scrolling down. Alrighty. So, first little bit here is staying organized or keeping yourself from having a total meltdown while you are putting a routine together. That's the goal of this section. So, first little bit here is as a routine comes on the horizon and you want to start um, having people sign up, or if you're selecting writers, kind of giving a little heads up. This is a routine that we're going to be working on. Here's the competition info. Um, what's the timeline? So here I have an example for when we did Hoedown, Showdown, because that's the last routine that I choreographed. Um, so for the timeline, like you can lay out how many practices you expect to have per week, and then what are your expectations for your main riders, how many practices they should be coming to per week, and what are your expectations for your alternates and your godals. This way, if you do have a sign up system where they like get in touch with the choreographer, they know that if I sign up as a main, I will be expected to attend this amount of practices per week. If I sign up as an alt, this amount of practices per week. So they know going in what what time commitment they'll be making. Um, it can also be helpful to include the practice length. So if generally your practices just for regular dressage are like an hour long, for example, but you're thinking your routine practices will be maybe 90 minutes, could be good to include that so that if your riders need to juggle their schedule a bit, maybe like they have some sports teams they're in, or maybe they're in other they're in some dressage teams or some a dressage club or whatever, it might overlap with those practices. So then they can know ahead of time. They can let the staff in those other clubs or teams know, hey, I'm going to be participating in this routine. This is the time commitment I need to make. So I will be missing practices on these days, or I might be coming late, that sort of thing. And then also I have here too, how can your writers focus. Oh, I would type before twice. Before, becoming distracted. So, like, say for example, normally your practices are an hour long, but you want to do 90 minutes for routine practices. Do you maybe add an extra break in the middle, give them time to like stretch, run around their room, go get a snack, that sort of thing. Um, and then also too, you want to include how many main spots are available, so that like say there's going to be 6 main spots, and then you kind of say what is the how are those allocated. Or you can say, I will be selecting the mains based on your performance so far, whatever. Lay out those details so they know how it works. And then after that, looking for alts or god alts. And then also too, you can include information on how practice reminders will be sent out. So maybe you have a current system for your dressage practices and you'll use that same format for your routine practices, or maybe you will develop a custom system, but it is nice to let them know ahead of time how will those reminders work, what should they look out for on Discord. Maybe you have some Pookies who like to put their dressage practices into like their Google Calendar, for example. So if they know ahead of time, like, oh, where should I look so that I can put that stuff into my calendar or my planner or whatever, they know where to find it. And then some examples of like reminders is you can like send a ping on Discord, and then maybe you have emoji reactions at the bottom and it's like coded. So like say for example, green circle, I can come today, yellow circle, I'm not sure or I will be late, and then red circle, I can't make it today. And then maybe you have like an absent form system where they send it to a channel why they can't make it that day, or they can DM the commander. So just kind of nice to lay this all out at the beginning, let them know what your expectations are, so they're not like surprised later on if you're like, hey, you didn't do this thing, and they're like, I had no idea I had to do this thing. So kind of nice to let them know ahead of time what you're looking for in terms of riders for the routine. Okay, next thing, keeping your riders on track. So this can be a bit of a herding cats situation at times, but um, ideally after each practice, if your main has an alt that rides their slot, sometimes they would follow up with that alt. If that alt is not there, they would DM them or ping them and say, hey, this is what we covered today, or this is what we changed today. Come take a look at my notes. I have an example here from Toilet. Toilet alted for Magpie, or Toilet was a god alt and rode for Magpie this one practice, and just sent Magpie a little ping. This is what we added on tonight. And then also a little point of view recording. So if some of your riders can do that, that's great. It can be very helpful to see that point of view uh, instead of just the top down from the commander's point of view. If you have like the in the arena point of view, that can be really helpful for some people. Um, so ideally, your mains and your alts are communicating with each other and doing all that, and you do not need to be behind them and going, hey, did you check in with your Pookie? Do they know that we made these changes? Do they know that we updated or we added on to the choreo today? So if you can encourage your riders to do that, that is excellent. It saves you so much time and worry. You just know they're on the ball and they're kind of helping each other out to make sure they're all on the same page. Um, as well, beyond just sending a little ping or a little DM saying, hey, here are the updated notes, or here's a little recording I made. You can watch it to help you understand what was added, what was changed. They can meet up in game before the next practice to catch each other up on what has been changed, added. And then this can be good too, because some people like to ask a lot of questions. So sometimes just communicating via text is maybe not as much information as they would like. So say, for example, one of your main riders wasn't there, their alt rode for them before the next routine practice. That alt and that main meet up together in game. The alt goes over with the main rider what was added, and then they can answer their questions at that time. Of course, this depends on how much free time your your riders have, but that's also an option. Uh, Another thing they can do is if you have a sub commander, so someone who is helping you choreograph and they understand the choreography from like the commanding point of view or the instructing point of view, say somebody couldn't meet up before the next practice to be caught up on their spot, the sub commander can take them into a separate call right before practice starts or at the beginning practice while everybody's doing warm ups or having like a little yap session before practice begins. That sub commander can take them into a separate call and get them caught up. Or if you have a god alt who's familiar with that spot. Usually these people are your more seasoned riders. They can pick up stuff really quickly. They can also explain the concepts to your other members. They could also take that Pookie into a separate call and kind of just quickly run through the changes or the add-ons with them. If all else fails, none of these options work out. You can have the writer who has not had the time to maybe read the updated notes, watch the point of view recording, come before practice and be caught up by their main or their alt. Or maybe you don't have a sub commander or another Pookie who can teach them. You can just have them meatball. In Crystal Parts, what this means is they follow somebody on foot. So they would follow their main slash alt on foot while during that practice, they would focus on updating their notes while that is happening. And then if you have time after practice, you can catch them up one on one. But ideally, you should not be doing that as much as you can, because like your the bulk of your time should be spent on teaching the group as a whole, preparing new choreography diagrams, etc. And if you're spending a lot of your time teaching one-on-one, that can be potentially draining for you. So if you can really encourage your mains and alts to communicate with each other, be like, hey, this is what we did. Here are the updated notes, or here's a little video, or we can meet up before the next practice. That will be great for you. Less stress. Alrighty. So that's keeping everybody on track together. All right, do you have any questions before we continue to the next section? Potentially. Or are we all good to keep going? Baguette. Okay, baguette means keep going. All right, next slide. So next little section we're gonna look at here is how do you pick your writers? How do you pick mains? How do you pick alts, etc. So in general, when you're looking at main writers, or say you're having people sign up to be a main writer and you're selecting amongst those people who signed up, you want to look for somebody who has generally high attendance during regular dressage practices because you can assume that this will carry over to routine practices. If they're generally meeting their attendance requirement every week, they're on time, um, all that good jazz, then you can assume that they will do the same thing during routine practices. Um, they're a keen learner, they're attentive, they pick up new dressage moves concepts very quickly. They maybe also ask good questions during practices about like why does the move there work this way, or why, for example, the circle alignment, like home alignment, that sort of stuff. They're interested in like how dressage works. They're good at communicating. So, for example, if during your regular practices they're always putting their reactions in a timely manner, they're putting in absent forms, or they're letting the instructor know ahead of time, hey, I won't be there for this span of time, or I might not be there because my mom wants to go grocery shopping, whatever. They're very good at communicating. So then, say for example, you send out the routine practice reminder and you see your reactions coming in. If somebody says they can't make it, then you can know ahead of time, oh, I see that their alt can make it. I'm going to um, maybe give the alt a ping or little DM, let them know ahead of time, hey, your main's not going to be there. So if you want to do a quick review of your notes, go ahead because you're going to be writing their spot. Or a main can't be there and their alt can be there, then you can check in with a god alt and be like, hey, can you write the spot today? And then they also have time to go and look at the notes and kind of get themselves into the loop before they write that spot. So good communication kind of gives you an idea that they will be do a good job as the main writer. And generally their job is that they learn one spot only and they ride that one spot only for the entire routine as the main. Um, moving on, what makes a good alt writer? These cookies generally learn one, maybe two spots. Maybe you have two spots in the routine that are mirrored. So if they learned one for the majority of the time, they could easily then flip and ride the second one since they're mirrored. The riders are doing the same thing for all the routine or most of the routine, just they're like across the arena from each other. Um, and then they ride that spot when their main is unavailable, and the rest of the time they follow them on foot. Meatball, that's the preference that we have in Crystal Pirates. I know some clubs and teams have doubles, so the main will ride and the alt will follow them on horse. That's up to you. I get confused when that happens. That's why I have the preference for on foot. Or what you can also do for your alt riders is at the beginning of practice, they ride and their main follows them on foot. Or at the very end of practice, you have like an alt run where any alts that are present come take the spot they're alting for, and the mains reverse meatball are on foot or watch from the stands. So then they also get the chance to ride on a horse, to be on their pony and experience the gate changes and stuff. Um, Also, ideally, they're very patient because sometimes you might have your alt riders be traffic cones. So what this means is they'll stand on a certain point in the arena and maybe they'll put their horse as a cone as well. And this is to help your other riders know, okay, when I'm running the shape, I need to pass through these traffic cones. So sometimes they're not even following on foot. They're standing there being a beautiful traffic cone. But then ideally, they're still maintaining focus. They're listening to what's being communicated by the commander. They're updating their notes. They're asking questions, that sort of thing. Um, as well, uh, they should have the ability to catch up if they miss some routine practices. So a way you can gauge this if you've never had them in a routine before is, for example, if they miss a regular practice, do they get in touch with the instructor, be like, hey, I missed Tuesday's practice. What did we go over? Are there some notes I can read or some videos I can watch, or can I schedule a private lesson? If they do that just in regular practice time, that's a good indicator that they would then make the effort to get themselves caught up during routine practices. And then another good thing is if they write the spot for their main, they follow up with their main in the timely manner and go, "Hey, this is what we did today. Here are my notes," like Toilet did up here. Here's what we added on, and I recorded a little video for you. Not everybody can record a video, but they let them know this is what we changed, just so you know. This is what we added on, just so you know. All that good chats. All right, I see some questions in the chat. So Pi, I'm just about to talk about Goddles here. Oh, I scrolled up too far. Felix, you're fired. Cricket, I will talk about practice recordings later. That's a good question. So down here at the bottom, Pi, is your answer about Universal slash Godalt. Your club or team may have a different name for them. Um, so if you sign up to be a Godalt, you will learn as many spots as are needed and will ride them when asked to. Um, so ideally, when you're selecting Universal or Godalt, they need less help from the commander to learn routine spots. And if they are being thrown into a spot after a good chunk of the routine has already been taught, they can learn just from reading the notes and need little direction from the commander. Um, and then if you are a god alt and you're not sure how to go about um, keeping track of all the different spots, something that Toilet and Mishi, who were my two god alts during Hoedown and Showdown, did is each practice they would pick a new person to meatball with, and they would either follow the notes that that main writer was writing, and then maybe on the side they would keep their own notes. Like maybe they wouldn't make them as detailed because they already had the main's notes to refer to, but they would add in little extra things that were helpful to them, or they would rewrite their own notes completely. It's your own preference as an alt or god alt. Generally, you can kind of go, okay, my main writer is doing the detailed work of writing out beautiful, polished notes that anybody can reference if they need to write that spot. And as an alt, my job is to catch them up when they're not there. And then if you have like your own little special way of like noting down like where arena lines are, where meter lines are, how to know which points you need to traverse through for the shapes, you can have that in your own little section, for example. So Shroom says alts block the commander so the commander can't see them. Yeah, that's a good idea, but then still your mains see the alts. So if there's double pony for everybody. So if that works for you, that works for you. My own preference is for following on Twitch, but uh, you can see what works best for your writers. So you could try both and see what they prefer. All right, so that's selecting writers. Um, And as you command more routines, you can kind of get a feel of what your writers are like. But also, as you have new members join, you can kind of see how they are in regular practices. And you can go like, hey, this person has been doing a really good job in the regular practice space. And they've never even written as an alt before, but I think they would do a good job as a main. What you could do, place them as a main writer. And then just in case, because you're not sure, you've never seen them in a routine, you could put a reliable alt. You have a Pookie who you know does a good job in routines. You've seen them before, or maybe this is your first routine ever. You put a good, reliable alt underneath them in case something happens. All right, let's keep going to the next one. So this is just a bit of like what you can do even prior to starting routine practices is how can you refine your skills even before you get into choreography and teaching choreography. So as a commander, some skills that are useful is your go timing. So you can practice this during regular dressage. So for example, if you have gated transition curls like your triple curl, you can call them with multiple goes instead of just one. So you can try to have your riders transition to the next gate without them having to take some strides in between. That's a way to practice. You can have them in a comb position and you try to call a cut back towards the wall as so that they turn neatly onto an arena line. Um, if they're in a circle, you can call goes so that they neatly perform the move over the center line, midline, the letter dies, that sort of thing. So then you can kind of know at this gate, I need to call the go at this point so that they perform the move here. So that's something you can practice ahead of time, just like in regular practice. And your writers don't even need to know that you're doing that. It's just for yourself. You're like, okay, my goal is to call the go so that at the trot, when they're here, they're going to turn onto the quarter line, for example. So that's something you can do by yourself ahead of time. Another thing is your commanding cadence. So I have the tendency to talk fast, so I have to remind myself during routines to slow down a little, especially when you're explaining, so they have more time to digest the information. But also to um, you can practice sequences. So this is like or sequences or movements. So this is like a chain or a group of moves together, usually that you do during routines. But you can practice those ahead of time. They don't necessarily need to end up in a routine, but it's like a way for you to see ahead of time what kind of information is useful to my writers. How quickly should I be calling goes? That sort of thing. And then the third thing is clarifying understanding. So how often do you check in with your writers? So for example, in regular practices, if you're teaching a new concept, you could be like, okay, do we understand this bit of slant and alignment, how coma alignment translates into slant alignment, or are you checking for alignment to your lead? And then you go, okay, when you're ready to try this, go into global store or give me a little full pivot or rear, like confirm with them that they understand what you just explained, or do you have any questions? And they can type them out for you or unmute and ask them. So yeah, just checking that they understand what you just said. Another option is as you get into routine practices, you can go and look at their notes. Once practice is over, like you don't really have time during practice to check their notes. Once practice is over, you can go and check their writer notes and see if they make sense with what you just taught them, and then you can kind of follow up and be like, hey, I think you didn't quite understand what I explained here. Here's some more detail. You can type it out for them, or you can ride their spot and record it. There's options for that. Next little bit is what skills are useful as a writer. So if you're going to command a routine, you could potentially build lessons around this prior to the start of the routine practices. So just general knowledge of the arena. So this is like, what are the arena lines, the meter lines, the wall letters. Um, your clubber team potentially has their own unique way of doing this. So just teaching to your writers so they know, like say for example, I said to somebody, when you're at quarter line B, 15 meter C, you are going to half moon left. If they're familiar with the way the arena is labeled, for example, Crystal Pirates, they would understand what I mean by that. So just making sure that they know how you refer to the arena. Also, if you have diagrams, that's helpful. Because then they can also see visually what do you mean by that instead of you just explaining verbally. Another good fundamental to have is your alignment in combs, circles, slants, and meter shapes at the walk, trot, canter, extended canter, fast gallop, back up. You can't really have the faster gallop because you can't gate up, but you can cut your corners and stuff. Um, and then staying mirrored or aligned across to a partner. So you can do some exercises on that prior to the routine starting so that when you teach the routine, you don't need to spend time going over that stuff because ideally you learned it prior to the routine beginning. And then you can just do weird stuff during the routine because they already know. They already know what you mean by, oh, I want you to be at the wide tier E echo 25-meter steep. They're like, okay, I understand where you want me to be. All right, and I'm doing this thing. Great. And I'm doing it at this gate. Wonderful. No problems. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff you can practice with your writers ahead of time. I don't think necessarily like knowing moves is very important. Um, beyond just the basic of understanding of like what is a curl, comb, curl over, keyhole, forward slant, back slant, fish ribbon. From there you can make anything. Um, and then down here, this is a bit of like a segue from these two, but developing a shared language. So how do you label meter lines, arena lines in your club? How do you describe the meter system? I know some people don't use 5, 10, 15, 20. They'll say like 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. So how do you describe stuff in the arena, or how do you describe concepts? And do your writers understand that? And then you can translate that into choreography. Do you, for example, have some special moves, or do you have custom gaps in alignment? Do you use modifiers? That sort of thing. So how can you make sure that when you create your choreography, are you then translating it into the shared language of dressage that you share with your writers? So yes, that's another thing that you can work on prior to actually starting routine practices. I see that Cricket has a question regarding proper right alignment awareness. Is the colored hat theory that was used in the Camp Cove body problem segment a good prop? Yeah, so what's also helpful during routine practices is if you have each of your riders has a competition set, so that they pick, like, for example, a differently colored hat and saddle pad shirt potentially from your general uniform, and then they wear that during routine practices, so it's easier for you to identify them from the top down. In the final recording, you won't have that, but up until the final recording, you'll be able to go, oh, the person in blue, I know that's Sushi. Sushi is there in blue. Um, or what you can do is you can just assign colors to each spot, and then you have the rider build a routine outfit around that color, just while you're learning the choreography, and at the end, it's whatever outfit you need for the final recording. That's another option as well. And then when you're drawing your diagrams, which I will have a couple slides down, you know what, let's just go there right now. We're talking about it. Whoa, here we go. When you're drawing your diagrams, you can color code your diagrams based on the each spot in the routine. So whether it's that rider's competition set or you've just assigned colors and then they make an outfit based on that color. So say for example, if we were writing this thing, this thing, diamond cross, Jenny would be wearing something pink, Hayden something light green, Sunny yellow, Star like purple lilac, Wheel red, and then Magpie dark green. And that way, when I'm looking at them from the top down, I can easily see who is who. Or so these are based on their competition sets, but I could have also just assigned them these colors and been like, hey, you're coming in a yellow outfit. And then their alt also wears a yellow outfit when they ride their spot. Um, yeah, and then Kappa is saying any colored max stat outfit, and then everyone has their own color, which is the same in the diagram. Yeah, exactly. So those are some options for that. Because if you just drew all these lines, say all in white, and it's like, which ones are mine? Having colors helps. Shapes and colors. Wow. Okay, that was a good set of tangent. Beautiful. Okay, so that's that section. Do we have any other questions before we keep going to commanding notes? Any other questions about what you can refine prior to beginning routines or how to select mains, alts, and god alts? Alrighty. I think we're ready to keep on going. Okay, so next little section is commanding notes. Okay, so these will save your butt. So I highly recommend that you do them. I mean, you don't have to, but they have saved me from crying, screaming, and throwing up many times. So I generally do mine in Google Docs because it's easy to color, change the text color. You can highlight. I usually change the background of the Google Doc to a like a gray, so I'm not blinded late at night while I'm working on it. Uh, But you could also do this, say that you have a storage server in Discord, or maybe you have a paper journal and you like to write on paper, you can totally do that. Whatever works for you. Um, just as long as it's there so you can refer to it before practices and between practices as you're planning out new choreo. It's like your second brain, basically. It's a backup. In case you forget everything, your commanding notes are there. So when I'm writing my commanding notes, I imagine that I'm being handed them for the first time and I need to command the routine based on these notes. And this is also helpful if, for example, at some point you can't be there to command, but you have maybe a sub commander or another instructor in your club who could command for you. And hopefully, based on if they've been able to come to some of the practices, uh, and even if they haven't, they could read your commanding notes, maybe watch any practice recordings up until then and know, okay, this is how this needs to be commanded. And then your riders are not missing out on practices while you're not able to be there. Uh, Another thing too is you want to have each rider spot written out per sequence or movement. So when your riders are writing their notes, they're only writing for their spot. You have to write everybody's spot. So when I'm writing my commanding notes, I'll like usually what I do is I diagram first to help myself visualize what's going to happen. And then after that, I translate the diagram into written notes. So for example, these guys are color coded to their diagram, and then I'm just writing what they need to do, like when they come out on the first go, come out global, for example, what they are doing. They are doing a counter slant in that diamond cross, star and magpie aligned to Hayden. And then I want them to look for pinwheel alignment at the center line. What does that mean at the gate they're at? They're trotting to turn that corner. So this is the old screen delay. As their tail is over, anchor's nose is reaching. Taking the corners of the trot so they're sharp, and then as they exit, they want to find counter slant alignment. Counter slant alignment again. Bruh. Um, and then here, this is like an old version of these notes that I went back and found. I wasn't really sure how the saddle cross would work, so I was like, we should maybe try Boss NTT one horse HIFI saddle cross, see what looks best. In the end, I think with the sequence of goes, the cadence of what they were called, they didn't even need to think about saddle crossing. So in a newer version of these notes, I had this crossed out, and I just made a note of when the second go needed to be called so that they wouldn't trample each other. Um, and then this was something also that I noted, in order for the next sequences to work properly with the music, I needed to call the goes a little bit more closely together so that they would be better set up for horseshoe overlook and then tumbleweed. And then we also had a situation where, um, as we crossed the center line, magpie and wheel were like the biggest section of the diamond cross. Here, we'll go to the diagram so you guys know what I mean. So our anchors were Jenny and Hayden, and then we had middle cookies, Sunny and Star, and then Wheel and Magpie were riding the biggest diamond. So they had more space to travel as they went from the center line to the midline. So what we found eventually is that as soon as they hit this and they were in counter slant alignment to their anchor, they had to full speed, just book it up to the top, take the trot, turn down, book it down. So with some experimentation, we figured out that's what they needed to do. So that's what that note is about. So your commanding notes also help you track those changes of like what what you had to tweak, what you had to adapt so that the sequence works the way that you wanted to. Also, it's a good chance to, um, maybe you're getting close to the end of the practice and you're like, I would like to try this next time, but you don't have enough time. So you quickly put it down in your commanding notes, and then next time let's try this. Or sometimes I find it's helpful as well to write down my commanding notes, questions I can ask to the writers to like double check, like how does this uh, gate change feel to you? Have you noticed some little things that help you perform the move better? Like sometimes I'll see if there's a pair that's mirrored. One of them is executing the move more cleanly than the other, and then I will stop and say, "Hey, I can see that you're transitioning really smoothly from this section to this section. What are you doing exactly?" And then they'll like type it out and explain, or they'll unmute and explain, or they'll ride it through and like explain as they're writing, and that could be really helpful for their mirror to understand like why this other writer is executing the move more smoothly. So sometimes too, you can put that in your command notes. For example, I could say, Sushi did a really great job in this one section, and I can see that Wasabi was struggling a little bit. Next practice or before next practice, ask Sushi to maybe record a point of view video or type out for Wasabi what they're doing exactly in that spot to get that smooth transition. So you can also throw that in your command notes. It's kind of like a way just to remind yourself because you're just thinking about like 100 things while practice is happening. And if you don't write it down, most of the time you'll forget. So that's what they're great for. Um, yeah, so here, noting down for yourself things to try for next practice. And then this can also help at the end of practice as you're going and looking, are my mains and alts communicating to each other what has been changed? And then maybe you see that maybe they missed some things. You can follow up, be like, hey guys, just a little reminder, we changed this as well. Um, it's there in your commanding notes. Like everything is like your master document. It is the holy bible of your routine. It has to be up to date, you know? And then another option too is if you see that overall there's a bit of a struggle bus happening, you can put that in your commanding notes. And before next practice, you can think about, there's a loud truck outside. Oh my goodness. Okay. You can think about, can the sequence be altered? Can I change some things around so that the transitions make more sense? Or maybe I don't make the gate changes as dramatic, or maybe we look for different alignment, or, uh, you know, that sort of thing. Just to make it more rideable for your Pookies. Or maybe you go, I think this sequence is a little bit too easy. I can make it more visually interesting by making it more challenging. You can also put that in there. But then if you see that maybe you don't want to alter the sequence, you want to keep it the way it currently is there the chance that you can squeeze in like a little all rank practice in between your routine practices and you just really focus on, for example, plant alignment or executing clean shrinks and expands in a circle. And you just really spend that hour repeating that over and over and over to kind of get that practice in before you go back to your choreography and working on that with your writers. So these are all things that you can track in your commanding notes. Again, it's like your second backup brain, so you don't forget anything. All right, I see Ween has a question. Any tips and tricks on how to adjust the goes moves for the music flow and beats? Um, so Ween, the previous clinic that I held on routine choreography basics, I talk a bit about timing your goes to the music. I personally edit the music to the choreography, so you can do that. Or Uh, adjusting your goes to the music just comes with practice. Um, if you have a set track that you're commanding to and you don't want to change it at all, what I recommend is playing the music for yourself and your riders during routine practice and practice commanding to it. With audio delay, you have to command slightly early compared to the music that is playing, and you just develop that skill over time as you practice. Um, and then also too in terms of like how to choreograph to the music, general rule of thumb is the slower the music, the slower the gates, the smaller the movements, the faster the music, the faster the gates, the bigger the movements. You don't have to do it exactly that way, but that's kind of like the general rule that people follow. Um, and then for timing wise, you could in your commanding notes you could say at at minute second point in the music command this, or I tend to do it more point based, and I know that when my rider reaches here, the music is at this spot. So, for example, if I was timing this, if I remember correctly, as Hayden's nose reaches the eighth line, call the second go for Jenny, Sunny, Wilma. And then that lined up well with the music in this routine. So it's like any other creative hobby that you do, it's just a question of repetition. The more that you do it, the better you get. What you can also do is watch other routines and try to guess how they were being commanded. Some clubs will also have a behind the scenes of the routine with the commanding audio. I know there's a couple on the Crystal Pirates YouTube channel with the commanding audio for the routine, so you can also look for that. But yeah, it's just a question of practice. The more you do it, the better you get. How exciting! Okay, so that's in general like your second brain, your commanding note document. The partner to this is your diagrams. So like I said before, I generally diagram first and then I write my notes second. Sometimes I do the other way, but most of the time I need to like draw it out and then sometimes I will write it out by myself in the arena or I'll like kidnap a pirate and have them be my guinea pig to kind of see what's going on. Um, and then I'll write my commanding notes. And then like we talked about earlier, it's helpful to color code each spot based on your writers. Or I also know that some choreographers like to color code based on the gates being used. So for example, maybe the walk is red, the trot is orange, the canter is yellow, the extended canter is green, etc. Um, once your diagrams are ready, and as you're teaching your choreography, you can throw them into Discord, and then your writers can then put them into their writer notes if they find it helpful to have that visual in there. And like we talked about earlier with your God alts, or in general, your more experienced writers can teach themselves their spot just from the diagram. They might not be able to teach themselves everything, but they can teach themselves most of the spots. So, for example, Wheel is one of our more experienced pairs. When I gave her the diagram, she understood that from her starting spot here, she needed to ride this shape. And she saw the diagram, and I hadn't communicated any more information to her. Once everybody had their diagrams, I then added the extra information that Wheel needed to look at Jenny and stay aligned to Jenny throughout the diamond cross. So Wheel knew that she did not need to look um, for Star. Star was starting from this opposite corner. She just really needed to focus on Jenny and make sure that she was in canter slant alignment with Jenny as they moved down towards E echo midline. And then once they learned that part, there was that extra kind of like, okay, how do I then reach the peak at the same time as my anchor kind of thing. But even just without any of that extra explanation, we all understood I need to ride this shape just by looking at the diagram. Whereas maybe you have some more junior riders who have maybe never ridden a routine before, or maybe they just haven't done as much dressage. You will probably need to give them the diagram and then verbally explain what it means. But your more experienced riders may be able to just look at the diagram and know, okay, I ride from this point to this point to this point. Theoretically, I'm looking at the whole thing. I think my anchor might be this pookie here, but I will wait for the commander to explain what's going on. And then again, as a choreographer, drawing out diagrams can help you visualize the sequences better before teaching them to your riders. So it's kind of like it helps you think through what you want them to do. You can test it out by yourself in the arena, or you can snatch a club member, maybe your sub commander, a fellow instructor, or just anybody who's available. Be like, hey, do you want to be my guinea pig and test this out before we do it with everybody? The diagram can kind of help you do that. And then also communicate visually to your riders what you want them to do. So that's the diagrams. Next little bit is practice recordings. So we'll watch the Hoedown Showdown one with my commanding audio, so you guys can see what I mean by that. But they can help your riders get caught up with the choreography. So they can be with or without music. What's just essential is your voice saying the commands. So then they could have it on in the background or maybe on a second monitor. And as they're listening to you commanding in the recording, they are riding their spot. And then, okay, and I wrote it out here. So if they miss practice, they can check the notes that were written for what they missed, and then they can ride the routine from the beginning up to the point, up to all the stuff that they missed or was added on, and kind of like get in that muscle memory before the next practice. And then also the practice recordings are a great way to track your progress over time. That can also be fun. You can go back to the first one that you ever put. You can kind of see, oh, the routine changed slightly here, 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 here. Or my command and cadence changed slightly in this spot and that spot as I got like better at knowing when to throw in my ghosts, that sort of thing. So let's have a little boomer moment while I change the stream.
Helpful. And let's Coulter set, pre, gopher, and pre, gopher. Keep an eye on your anchor pookies. You're going up your mountain, down your mountain. Up the mountain, down the mountain. Up the mountain, down the mountain. And stand by for your horseshoe overlook coming up. And pre, gopher. Oh, Haiti is lagging. Oh, there we go, teleported. And your point-based crescent keyholes, tappy, tappy, tappy for the canter. Good. And pre, gopher. Sorry, I was so mesmerized by your keyholes. I forgot this a second ago. Felix referred. And then look for wheel and magpie in your tumbleweed. And then you're looking for canter comb alignment in the dusty baguette. And pre, gopher. Canter comb alignment to wheel and magpie. Good job going down. And pre, gopher. Your right leggy in. And we're doing that letter die transition to Pablito and Hayden as our anchors for Balance Point. Really focus on that canter alignment going in. Yes, good. Yeah, that's much better. Magpie looks really good. Nicely done. And good eyes, Pablo. And get ready for your Shady Bell. And pre, gopher, and pre, gopher, and pre, gopher. And we're doing NTT with Hayden through and if saddle gaps if needed. And stand by for your Lakay. And Lakay set. Pre, gopher, and pre, gopher, and pre, gopher. we're still NTT with Hayden going back through a second time, and if saddle crosses if needed to not murder monkeys. Good. And I'll let you guys go around one more time. Lock in on that rotary alignment. Good. This is done. And get ready for a halt coming up. And halt. Hurry. Go for it.
So, yes. Okay, so that was a little bit of like general commanding notes, diagrams, practice recordings. Do we have any questions about that before we keep going to writer notes? Morning of Toil is going to send the baguette again. The baguette. Nous allons voir la baguette. All right. Do you record a commanding audio video with each practice? I like how Toil is asking that question. She knows the answer. Yes. Ideally, as you're at the end of each practice, you try to get like a final practice take. Um, this is good documentation for your writers who missed it, and sometimes your writers are just curious to see what it looks like from the top down. So generally, I will stream the top down angle for anybody who has a second monitor if they would like to see it to check their alignments, their gaps, that sort of thing. But for your Pookies who don't have that, or they just like to rewatch at the end and see what does it look like from the top down view, it's just kind of nice to have that, tracks your progress over time. They can practice on their own time if they want with the commanding audio, that sort of thing. Okay, let's keep going to writer notes. So just to begin, we have some examples here. So Wilma was a main writer for Hoedown, Showdown, and then Pablo was an alt. This is just two examples of their notes for culture, which was that first sequence is the one that's diagrammed here. So that's what their writing notes were. So the overall goal with writer notes is that it aids with retention. When you write stuff down, you're much more likely to remember what you're learning. Highly, 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 highly recommend that you take notes as a writer, or if you're a commander, you require notes, or you strongly recommend notes. It helps so much. Um, Also, as your writers do their notes, they're communicating their understanding of the material to you. So at the end of practice, you can just go back and do a quick scan of everybody's notes and see if they actually understood what you were saying. Or maybe you can like kind of go, oh, here, maybe you didn't write enough detail. Can you please write extra detail so if your alt needs to write for you, they understand what they should be doing. So that's what this is here, provides a reference for other writers. So it helps you remember stuff, helps show to the commander that you know what you're learning, and it's a reference for anybody who may write your spot. As a main writer, you're the keystone for your spot, so your goal is to write detailed notes that communicate clearly what should be happening for that spot. And then if an alt has to step in and ride for you, ideally they should just read your notes, maybe watch a practice recording, and they can know what to do without needing to ask too many questions to the commander. They can just read your notes, watch the recording, and go, I understand what I need to be doing without any additional information. So for example here, if we look at Wilma's notes, she has her starting position here where she begins in global. And then for culture set, she notes that there's two goes in this sequence. First go she ignores. The second go is when she exits global and takes the canter and then aligns to Jenny. And then Pablo was Jenny's alt. So this is why it says Jenny slash Pablo here. And then they're in a canter slant. So with the old screen delay, what was the canter slant? Your front hooves are one quadrant ahead of your English front hooves. So that's what that is there. And then where does she go to in that canter slant? And then this is what we talked about earlier in the commanding notes. We found out that for Wilma and Magpie, since they were in the biggest diamond in that diamond cross, as soon as they hit the center line, they needed to go as fast as they possibly could to hit the top of it in alignment with their anchor. So they would canter to the center line, go as fast as possible, fastest gallop to the peak of their diamond on the midline, slow down to the trot there, turn at the trot, and then zoom down back again. So Wheel has noted that down in their spot notes. And then just a little note here that we need to trot the top of the diamond so that it's a sharp peak, it's not rounded, and then immediately back into that fastest gallop. And then she had a little note here, you can use your scroll wheel to change your speed more quickly than tapping up with your keyboard. Um, and then they had a little note here that as I pass the 15-meter, what is my alignment to my anchor? In this case, it was tail to nose at the trot with the alt spring delay. And then here for Pablo was alting for Jenny. So when you're an alt, ideally you're also writing your own detailed notes. Understandably, though, that can be a little bit more difficult because as an alt, generally you aren't required to attend as many practices as a main, so you will be not there as often. But ideally, you're keeping up with what your main is writing and you're writing your own version. Or another option is that you would have your mains notes as a reference. Maybe you like copy paste them and then you just write your own little like sub points or bullet points underneath, like little things that you find helpful. Um, yeah. So here's an example of Pablo writing notes as an alt. So some alts will write more detailed notes, some will write less. My preference is more, but especially if you're writing multiple spots, like if you're a god alt, sometimes it's just nice to like reference the mains notes as you're writing their spot, and then maybe you have your own little uh, section where you write your own little like notes for yourself. Like when I'm writing uh, Magpie spot, for example, make sure you do this. When I'm writing Goose's spot, make sure you do this, that sort of thing. And then you just trust that your main will do a good job and you can reference their notes as needed. All right. And then here's the last little thing. What are some good options for note taking for your riders? So in the past Crystal Pirates, we would just use a shared Google Doc. So what's fun with Google Docs is you can throw in images, you can underline, you can highlight, you can change colors, all that exciting stuff. What I found, uh, what are the, so those are the pros of the Google Doc. And then you can easily just scroll up and down to see everybody's notes. And you can use like the subtitle or the heading feature to kind of give yourself little spots that you can jump to. Um, but with Google Docs, what I would find though is sometimes people would type in other people's sections by mistake. Sometimes people would delete other people's notes by mistake. So that's kind of like the con of a Google Doc. Um, my current preference and what Music Crystal requires now is that you have a Discord forum. Or you can just have a category with channels underneath it, and each main writer has their own channel or forum post, which is where they put their notes. And then each alternate writer also has their own forum post or channel for their notes. And then everything is in Discord. Because sometimes too, if you do a Google Doc, your writers are like, I have to go somewhere else to take my notes. Man, it's just easier to stay on Discord and do everything there. And then also too, like you can ping them within their forum post and be like, hey, I noticed in this spot, could you maybe add a little bit more detail? And then when they've updated it, you would delete your message, for example. Um, from what I've learned using the forum feature, in the future, I would have a separate forum poster channel, which is like just for updates and chatting. So that way the mains forum or channel is clean. It's just their notes in there, nothing else. Same for alts, their notes, nothing else. And if they need to update um, their main or alt, they would go into that separate um, channel or forum post and chat there about updates, or maybe you have threads or what have you. And also, what's great about Discord is you can go and look at their notes and see, like, hey, who's your housekeeper? What do you have in your house? And you can kind of check to make sure that they're taking their notes properly and they're communicating with each other nicely. But another option, so these two are good for like shared notes where everybody else can see everybody's notes and you can go and check that they're taking their notes properly. But say you have some Pookies who prefer to take their notes like in a paper journal or on their notes app on their phone or tablet, or they like to do a voice note. They like to speak their notes. Another option that I can think of is maybe Obsidian because you can link notes to each other. But what's important here is that if they do take a personal note elsewhere, that they then later transfer those notes or transcribe them into the shared note-taking space. Because if you have a main writer taking their notes in a paper journal, but that information is never transferred into the Google Doc or Discord, for example, well, nobody else can see that. So if they do have that preference of taking their notes outside of the shared note-taking space, just say, hey, please make sure that you transfer it over into the shared space afterwards. So yes. So I think that's the final thing I had. Yes. Okay, final thing. So any questions? We're finishing on the hour. I'm proud of myself. Usually I yap way more. We have a whole marathon going. Do we have any questions about anything that we discussed or any other routine related questions? I can also yap about that for a bit if we have some. Or are we all Gucci? Are we satisfied? Do we have baguettes or other snack foods to say we're happy? Yes, the baguette and Cha Cha the crab. Very nice. I see a poopy typing. But if you guys need to head out, you're welcome to head out. If you got a question, send it in the chat. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the picnic. How can you do transitions through routine like moves or shapes? Um, I'm so sorry, Hientia. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Let me just send the link to the previous clinic that I did, which was all about like choreography basics. And um, in that, I do um, talk about transitions, and I do have examples from the Hoedown Showdown routine that I choreographed of like why did I transition this way from this sequence to this sequence. Um, and I would say when you're first starting to choreograph, don't worry too much about transitions because the best thing you can do when you're first starting is just to do your first routine. Your first routine will not be perfect. That is totally normal. You will improve each time you choreo and each time you teach the routine to your writers. So what I would say with your first routine, just start out with some sequences or movements, and then you can just chain them together with writing to the next bit in single file or using a comb, for example. And as you choreograph your routines, you will just start to come up with transition ideas. And like we talked about earlier, what a good thing to kind of get your choreographing brain going is watching other routines and identifying what their transitions are. So say for example, there's a routine and they're riding in a circle, they're doing some circle moves in the circle, and then they move into maybe like a comb position or a slant position. How did they get into that? What was the transition? So as you choreograph routines and as you watch more routines, you will start to identify how are they moving from sequence to sequence. It just takes practice. Cricket, I don't like, I should say that. I do not use rifle. I find it takes too long and I get bored. So I do not use rifle. Um, if you're in their Discord server though, their staff are very helpful. If you have questions, I have seen that. They're very responsive. I think there are a couple tutorials on YouTube too on how to get started. Like I think Beck from Emerald Hunters, if you go on the Emerald Hunters YouTube channel, I think Beck has made a like how to get started with rifle thing. I personally don't use it, so I can't really talk about it. I prefer to draw diagrams because you can do it fast and dirty, and then make them more pretty if you want to. But I don't use rifle, so I can't talk about that. Oh, thank you, Kappa. I'm glad you enjoyed. Have a good one, May. Good night, NA. Yeah, if you like rifle, it can really great because it is an animated diagram. But I tried using it and it just takes too long for my attention span, anyways. And I feel like I can draw the diagrams quicker and communicate as much information as I need to with those. But if you enjoy the animated stuff and if your writers find it helpful, then Rideful is definitely an option if you have the time to input your sequences into it. So Levi is asking, how many diagrams do you end up with per routine and how much little do you put into one? Oh, that's a good question. Let me go and see. How many did I make for Hoedown Showdown? Uh, so I had eight or nine for Hoedown Showdown. Um, and those were then split into subgroups. So I had 8 or 9, that was all the writers, and then I split each into 2 or 3 so that the lines were not overlapping too much. But it depends on the length of the routine. When I draw my diagrams, maybe I spend half an hour on each one because I'm thinking about what I want my writers to do. How are they transitioning from the last sequence? Sometimes I'm also testing in the arena by myself and I'm marking where do I need to turn at this gate or how do I think these writers will interact with these writers. Um, so, and it also depends like what kind of how you're using, what are you using to draw your diagrams? So I usually just draw my iPad, but say you're using Canva, that could take a bit more time because you have to like manipulate the lines and shapes or whatever. If you're doing Rideful, that will take more time as well. So kind of depends on what you're working with. Generally like half an hour each time. All right. Do we have any other questions? You can also just draw your diagrams on paper and then like scan them or take a photo. That's also an option. You don't have to use a fancy drawing program. Okay. If we are all good, we have no more questions. We can end the clinic here. Yay! All right. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday or Sunday if you're currently in the future because of time zones. Thank you for coming. Have a good one.